Greetings, citizens, and thanks for tuning in to the first Nindie Backlog Club for Guacamelee. I'm Jeff, and we just finished playing the original Guacamelee to wipe that game off of all of our backlogs, and I've got a few friends from the Nindie Nation community Discord with me, so let's run through and say hi to everybody. Agent Gold.
Hello, hello.
Nugget.
Hello.
Phantomic.
Hey there.
Random.
Hello.
And Nate.
Hey, that's me.
That is you indeed. Thank you all for joining us tonight. If you're not familiar, the Nindie Backlog Club was just kind of an idea that we had as part of Nindie Nation to, as a community, play through a game that's been sitting on our backlogs for a long time. So it's like a book club, but for video games that we probably should have already played, or in some cases are replaying. Today we're going to be talking about Guacamelee, the title that released in 2013, developed by Drinkbox Studios. It wasn't their first title. Their first one was Tales from Space: Mutant Blobs Attack, but it was their biggest title. It was then re-released on modern platforms at the time, PS3, Xbox 360, Vita, etc. A year later, in 2014, and then it came to the Switch as the Super Turbo Championship Edition in October 2018. The Super Turbo Championship Edition, or STCE, added a couple of new combat features, a couple of big levels that we'll talk about, and a couple of other items that we'll dig into a little bit later. Overall, Guacamelee has been very well received by gamers who are fans of indies or not, and has received, depending on the version, around an 86 to an 88 over Metacritic. The developer Drinkbox Studio has been in the news recently because they just announced their newest game, a Nindie trifecta called Nobody Saves the World, that is hopefully coming out later this year. But to kick things off, I want to ask some of the group here today, if you've had a decent amount of experience, you've played some games developed by Drinkbox in the past, I'd love to hear.
Well, I played the original Guacamelee on PS3, and I think it was on launch. I had never played Mutant Blobs, and I went back and played that after Guacamelee, and it was kind of cool to see some of the elements that they took from that game after playing Guacamelee. And then I played Guacamelee 2, and it wasn't until this past March, whenever we went under quarantine, that I played Severed, and I really enjoyed that game. But I like the overall style that's kind of they carry through each game.
They definitely do have their own art style. We'll talk about how that's such a big part of why Guacamelee was successful. Thinking about Guacamelee 2 or the Tales from Space games, has anybody else in this group had some time with the other games developed by Drinkbox?
No, I haven't yet.
So yeah, Guacamelee was the first one I played. I think I got it on like a Humble Bundle at some point in time and hadn't really heard of Drinkbox, and then just went crazy for Guacamelee, and then wanted to play Severed, but I didn't have a Vita at the time, and I think that launched as a Vita exclusive. I've played it a little bit.
Yeah, it was a launch game.
Was it a launch game? I didn't remember it was like a Vita exclusive, and I was like, I don't have a Vita, and I wanted to play it. But then I got it later for Switch and played it a bit. It's awesome. And Guacamelee 2 is also great. So this was sort of like, wasn't really my backlog club. It's the Nate ignores his backlog to play a game that he really likes again, and I have no regrets.
Yeah, it was really fun to revisit. I'm curious, when this game released, if anybody else here has spent some time with it. Let's talk about the game itself as a Metroidvania or a combo-based action exploration platformer. List a bunch of subgenres. Nugget, I'll ask you, because I know that you had originally been interested in the game, but it wasn't until the Backlog Club when you finally dove in. I'd love to hear about why you maybe decided not to take a look at it and then revisited it now as a group.
Well, to be honest, the thing that put me off the most was the way it draws back on some of the bigger scenes, and I have bad vision, so I thought I would just lose myself in all of the action, which did happen, but it turns out it was just fun anyway. So the thing that took me so long to play it wasn't really a factor at all. And that's pretty much that. I loved it, and I've never really been a big fan of the Metroidvanias overall. I used to, before I got the Switch, I was always the AAA, PlayStation or Xbox player. Never really exposed, but then I got a Switch and started watching random videos about things and started getting into indie titles. And so you can only play so many games at a time, so it just took me a while to get to it.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think, back in 2013, there weren't many people playing Metroidvanias, as it were. The idea that you've got these big areas to explore, you gain new abilities, you revisit areas. That really wasn't prominent in video games. Those had definitely died off after a while. I think we got, what was the Xbox game that did it right around the same time, or maybe a couple of years earlier?
Where it was it was almost like a James Bond type of deal with the exosuit.
It was the one that Nolan North was in that one year when he was a voice actor for like every single game.
I've played through that.
Is it Shadow Complex?
Yes,
is that it?
Shadow Complex. Yeah. And then I think it ended up coming eventually to PlayStation. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, I wonder if that one's on the Switch. But there weren't too many games at the time that were revisiting that tried and true formula. Now this week or nowadays, every single week we've got at least one. I think this week we had like 3 or 4. So and it's thanks to Guacamelee and a few other games that came out back in 2013 that really opened up this overall genre to a new audience. And I think, Guacamelee takes about 6-7 hours to beat. Was anybody significantly faster or slower than that, like 6, 7, 8 hour time mark?
I was at 13.
I haven't actually beaten it yet. I got stuck and I don't know what to do now. So the tutorials aren't really helping me right now. So I'm stuck after I forgot what it's called. That one dungeon. I don't remember the name of it.
Well, it's one of the temples, probably. What's interesting, I don't know if anybody else ran into this, but there was a lot of content made for the original Guacamelee, but there is not a ton of content out there in terms of guides and walkthroughs for the STCE.
Yeah, I know.
And that's the only version that's available on the Switch. And so there was a point where I got stuck where the new areas open up, and it's actually like it completely changes the way you get your last ability. So we'll touch on that because I would be interested to see if that's where you're stuck, because I kind of had the same issue. I was like, why can't I find anything online about this? So that's interesting.
I think you could bomb through this game in like 6 to 8 hours if you didn't sort of go after all the optional stuff. But I don't know, like I couldn't help myself but to go after all the optional stuff. So I think it took me about 15 hours to really do everything, because I remember getting to where I could go to fight the final boss and I was like, wait, like I should have more stuff. And so then I stopped and went and ran around the map finding treasure.
And you really need that extra stuff too. Yeah. Go ahead, Agent.
I take a note-taking approach with these kind of exploration games. It's like I see something I can't get, but it's obvious that I will be able to. I write down what's there and what I see, and it's like, what ability do I think I'm going to need to get there? So like my run took about 10 hours going in completely blind. That was stopping to get some extras that I definitely didn't need in 100% 1 or 2 areas on the map along the way. So that's what it looks like on my end.
So it sounds like, and how do you play one of these games without getting some of the extras, especially as you see things open up? We'll touch on the structure of the game a little bit more. I want to touch briefly on the combat system. What's interesting about the way the game works, just like any other Metroidvania, the way that your character gains new abilities is also the same way that your character finds new areas in the game. And essentially, I think it kind of works like playing a game of Smash Brothers. You've got your special button, and you get to push 4 different directions or stand still. And your ability to punch in different directions, uppercut, ground pound, those kind of things are the ways that you break open new doors, find new areas. So you're constantly seeing different colored doors everywhere. You know, they do a really good job of having that visual style. But other than that, other than the way it helps you get to new areas, the game has a pretty deep fighting system. You know, it's button mashy, but what would you say? It's like guided button mashing. You can kind of aimlessly mash away, but you need to have an idea of your end goal if you want to try to carry combos, which helps you gain more money. Anybody have any thoughts to share? Random, I think it's been a while since we heard from you. What did you think about the combat itself in Guacamelee?
I dug the juggling mechanic where, you know, eventually once you went to some of the kiosks, you know, to buy more moves, you could add like the pile driver and stuff like that. So if you'd be able to string together, you know, the basic combo, then go into like a headbutt, then an uppercut, and then you could jump up and then slam them down to the ground, you know, throw your enemy into another one, combo off of that. So, you know, it was almost that, and then you could mix in the dodges and everything too, where you could like almost roll behind somebody, you know, like I said, grab one enemy, throw it into the other one. It was like kind of free form where you could, you know, if you just wanted to mash it out, you could. But at the same time, if you knew how to juggle the enemies and, you know, bounce them off the walls and, you know, with the double jump, you could even, you know, set up combos after that too. So it was kind of fun where after each time you gained a new technique, you could string that into your combos. And then there was like the dojo to kind of, you know, kind of show you what was possible, where, you know, some of the later ones, it was like, okay, yeah, there's probably no way I'm going to use this in an actual fight. But, you know, just the idea that they showed you what you could do.
Anybody else have thoughts on the combo? I think that was a good breakdown. Anybody have thoughts on the combat system, as well as did anybody finish all of the combo chicken rooms?
I didn't do any of them, to be honest, except for the ones that you had to do at the beginning, because I usually just brute forced it, to be honest. And then I would think more about which enemies to attack when, rather than which attacks to use. That was my approach.
So kind of balancing which ones are getting ready to attack, or which ones have the lowest health, or things like that.
Right, yeah.
And I think it goes to good design that the game allows for that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, the combat in a lot of things about the game definitely has a high skill ceiling, which is good for them. Maybe not good for your average player, but kind of good for your average player. Like, for a lot of the game, when it came to combat, I was just using like the 1-2-3 punch combo, and that was plenty for what I needed, throwing an uppercut here or there. Started to get a little bit more into the flow of it as I got into it, and there were times where it was just kind of blowing me away how many enemies I was taking on at the same time. And every now and then I just glance at the top of my screen and I see there's prompts for like player 2, player 3, player 4 to jump in. And I think to myself, am I playing a 1-player exploration game, or am I playing a 4-player beat 'em up? And it's I have a screenshot that I should probably submit of the most recent dojo combo that I saw, because like I specifically screenshotted it saying to myself, you and I both know that I am never going to use this practically, but I will try to get it here. And I haven't gone back to try to get it yet.
There have been multiple times. I remember my original playthrough of Guacamelee was on the Vita, and I want to say it was like 2015 or something. It was when I think it was either a couple of bucks or it was on PlayStation Plus. So I definitely wasn't an early adopter for the game. And I remember working through those last combo chicken rooms on a family vacation, like in my dad's house, and the whole room being like, is he going to snap that thing in half? Like, I was just like, one more time.
They were ridiculous. Like the last few challenges of the last bunch of the combo chicken ones, like, I don't even know how many times I tried. I think it was not the last one. The last one I think wasn't as bad, but like the second to last one you had to do, where you basically had to combo the grunt all the way across the shack. And if he bounced off the wall, he'd get out of your like range where you could hit him. And it was so frustrating. But I eventually got it because I can't stop. I mean, I love, like, the combat to this game felt so refreshing because I love sort of Metroid games, Castlevania games. But this was the first one I can remember playing where it sort of took that combo feel from like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, but put it in a 2D sort of Castlevania game instead of in a 3D game. And I thought it was just super fun and interesting. And of course, now we see it happening in, like, you know, Hollow Knight and Dead Cells. I think those games probably were inspired by Guacamelee. They had to have been, to me at least.
That's a super fair point. The notion that, you know, even we talked about Shadow Complex, you know, most of the games in this style were all based around shooting and ranged attacks. And then, you know, now even look at the last Metroid game to come out. They added melee combat in the last Metroid game, that Samus Returns remake. So, you know, what? And I don't know that any other game had it, at least to this level, before Guacamelee.
I mean, Castlevania, of course, was melee, but it wasn't combo sort of driven, right? It was just sort of get in there and slash, and then get out of the way, sort of like combat.
The only other one I could think of was when they turned Blood Rain into a 2D Metroidvania.
Oh, that was good.
That was like a real combat-heavy Metroidvania. Yeah, that was decent. At first, I wasn't sure about the art style, and then when I played it in motion, it was really good.
Yep, I think I had the exact same thought with that one. It was good. So let's talk about, before we kind of walk through the game and dig into some of the nitty gritty on a couple of things. Let's talk about what makes this game cool. We talked about the structure and the exploration. We talked about the fighting system, but I think a lot of what makes Guacamelee so neat is the visuals and the theming. And so you know, if you're watching it right now, you're seeing just how striking the visuals are. You're seeing that the game is themed around Dia de los Muertos. I'm terrible at saying that. Or as I told my daughter, I'm like, oh yeah, this game's kind of the same as Coco, because that's her world. Her world is Pixar and Disney movies. But you know, it's got this Mexican style theming through and through. Incredible soundtrack, incredible characters that we'll talk about in a minute, and just everything about it. It's hard to mistake what you're seeing on screen for another game. Anybody else want to share what they thought about, you know, the overall presentation and feel and tone of Guacamelee?
I was a big fan of how they always they threw in some Spanish words here and there just to add to the atmosphere a bit. Thought that was cool.
Like, and above just the visuals, because the visuals are amazing, but the writing is so good and so funny. Like, I can't remember another Metroid game where I talk to every NPC I can find, just because the dialogue is so funny, and I just would run around talking to everybody in each of the towns.
Yeah, Mexican culture is like especially nice to me. So like seeing this visual style, seeing masked wrestling represented, the soundtrack just absolutely beautiful. But what else was I about to say? Yeah, I'll think of it.
I like the pop culture references. That was pretty funny. You know, I had to screenshot a few of those.
Yeah, there's a lot of good screenshotable moments. Now, I think Nate said he's played Guacamelee 2. Has anybody else played the sequel?
Yeah.
Okay, so Random, you have 2. So for those who aren't aware, they take that meme culture and they take the pop culture references. Basically, in the sequel, all of the things that made the first game funny, they turn it up to 10, and you get even more of that.
Come on, I think it goes to 11.
That sounds amazing.
It's great. Well, sorry, Jeff.
Please.
I was going to say, the thing that really hooked me, though, like, I loved the comedy and the visuals and everything, but I don't know, this game just has such an amazing fluid feel to it. Like, the movement in this game, not just the combat, but jumping and platforming and dodge rolling through spikes and things. Like, it's just a game that feels so good to play. Like, the movement just feels perfect in this game to me. And that's the other thing I love about Guacamelee 2 is they basically took everything good about the movement and the mechanics in Guacamelee 1 and just ratcheted it up to like these crazy challenges where you just feel like a luchador ninja sort of going through everything. It's just so much fun to play.
And you look at, I'm sure most of us, if you were to look at, the final boss fight, or you were to look at a video of you playing late game encounters, and you were to see what that would look like before you ever even tried playing the game. I mean, you look at it and you're like, there's no way I'll get there. But I think the pacing and how they roll out the new abilities it makes so much sense, but that it never feels like it's too much at one time, except for the combo chicken, of course.
Well, and maybe. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I was going to say, like, almost how you were saying, it's like Smash Brothers, where, it's one of those easy to pick up, like, difficult to master kind of things, where each one of the techniques, it's not like you're, you have to do it at this certain time, or it's this weapon that you can only use in certain areas. Since they all chain together and they're only, down or left or right or whatever, it makes it super fluid. So it's not like, some games like Hollow Knight where, you pick up new abilities, but it's, sometimes they're difficult to, find where to go to use them, or, chain together techniques and stuff like that. So like, I thought the accessibility was great.
Well, a lot of the really hard parts were totally optional too. You didn't have to go do them. So like if you don't love like a super just knock your head against the wall challenge, then you just say, yeah, I don't want to do this. And then you don't, and it's fine. The only part of the game where I really hit like the skill ceiling was the El Infierno challenges. Like a few of those. Yeah. But they made me cry. But then I was super happy when I finally conquered them.
I haven't conquered them yet.
They're tough. I haven't. I think I got through about half of them. And even then, you touched on a good point, both Random and Nate, that you don't have to do anything in the game, but you can still get all of the abilities and see everything there is to see, because you can grind the enemies. You can go back and revisit areas. And I think it does a really neat job of not respawning every enemy. You're not redoing the combat challenges again. But, if you backtrack and revisit an area, for the most part, the grunt enemies are back, the cannon fodder, and you get to go through and just kind of pick them apart. So I like that. Nugget, I think you said you were doing the same thing. I think you were, at one point you were mentioning going back and grinding for some currency. Did you get into that at all?
Yeah. For the final boss, I went in and just got handled in ways that I didn't enjoy. So I went back and tried to find those spots that I couldn't find. I should have taken notes. That's a wonderful idea. But I tried to find all those ground pound spots that I missed early on in the game, and find those extra, coins and skull pieces and things like that. And I did, and I finally got enough. I don't know if that's what helped, or just a little bit of luck, or just, eventually you kind of just see the patterns happening. I think someone gave me on the Discord, they mentioned some of the patterns, and I finally, took a step back and watched one of my videos that I recorded on the Switch, and saw the patterns happening while I wasn't trying to stay alive. And
oh, that's smart.
Yeah, that was actually really helpful. So like, there are patterns there when I'm not just desperately trying to cling to my last bit of life.
No, that's a really good idea. I want to jump into we'll kind of look at it as like a three-part formula for the game itself. And this is your one warning that there will definitely be spoilers here. I don't think many people are going to listen that aren't worried about that. At the beginning of the game, you are Juan Aguacate. Yep, there's the first one. There's a lot more. You're an agave farmer, and you are going out for an evening with Lupita, who is the president's daughter, otherwise known as El Presidente's daughter. And, all of a sudden chaos goes awry, and Carlos, what is it, Calaca? Is that how you guys all said it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I assume it has to be that there's an achievement with a pun, so that makes me think that's how it's pronounced, yeah.
Ah, yes, you're right. So he comes in from the land of the dead. He wants to sacrifice El Presidente's daughter in an attempt to merge the world of the living and the land of the dead. And all of this happens on the holiday, the Day of the Dead. And he knocks Juan out in one hit. And then you are sent to the land of the dead, and you slowly start waking up. And one of the things that I'm interested in some of your opinion, you get to the land of the dead, and you run into Tostada, and she is a luchador, just like Juan becomes when he puts on the mask. She gives him the mask. I don't know that I ever saw a reason for Tostada to exist other than as a plot device and almost as a tutorial device in some ways. Like, she seems like there's a part of me that wonders if the game was developed and then Tostada was added in there when they were like, oh, this part doesn't make sense during Q&A or something. Did anybody else get that idea, or is there something I'm missing about Tostada's involvement in the game?
Wasn't she
a second player?
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah,
She was there so I would have a female player.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, I think that like second player is part of it. A little bit of story exposition because Juan is a mute hero kind of character. He doesn't have any lines, so someone's got to be speaking what are probably the main hero's thoughts. Super Turbo Championship Edition, I think one of the added sections, from what I gathered, it's an added section, gave at least a little bit of background about her. But yeah, she's more or less just window dressing.
But it is a good point that a couple of her special abilities with her costumes, I actually used the majority of the time. It's neat that some of those things get added. So we go into the land of the dead and we start trying to battle our way out. And throughout our quest to save El Presidente's daughter, we have a couple of other folks that we meet. And please, if you have anything that you would like to say about these characters, this is the chance to chime in. One of my favorites, we talked about Tostada. We talked about the combo chicken. I have no idea how to pronounce the goat's name, but someone else explain to me the goat's role, please.
I think
basically the sensei.
Yep.
I think he was comedic relief as well.
100%. So who understands the point with the statues? Who wants to tell me what so you run into the goat. And more often than not, when you engage with Y Chivo,
anybody else, isn't it? Or is it Ichivo? I thought it was El Chivo.
We can go with that. So you run into the goat, and usually it comes along with getting a new ability. So who can explain to me the reference that was relied on over and over and over with getting those new abilities?
Well, if you're familiar with this kind of game at all and you see a statue of a bird creature holding what looks like an egg or an orb, and he specifically called it a Chuzo statue, you probably have a Metroid reference on your hands.
I mean, my favorite thing about it was when you keep breaking them, and then he keeps cussing you out for breaking all his statues. Why do you just keep breaking my statues?
When you break the first one, he says something like, I've only got like 15 of those left. So in my notes, I actually wrote 15 left and counted it down every time I broke one. There are more out there that weren't broken in this game, if he's telling the truth about that number.
Well, there's my favorite part about breaking the statues is there's one that you break and you get nothing. And then it does like the splash screen where you get your power and it says nothing.
That one was good. I loved how he got more and more exasperated with each one you broke. At the end, he just kind of sounded desperate almost.
Those are awesome moments running into him and seeing him go from a goat to he transforms into an old sensei. And again, even the animation, it's like it reminds me of some old cartoon, but like you see like his head shoot up and then his arms pop out. And as he transforms from a goat to a human or vice versa. And it's funny every single time.
For his new groove.
You're right. That's exactly what it was. You are absolutely good call. That is exactly what it was. There's more than one antagonist in the game. You don't run into just Carlos Calica and that's it. He has an entourage, and his entourage includes Jaguar Javier, Flameface, and Shtabai. Is that right? We had a discussion about the pronunciation
I think
there.
you got it right.
What was the name of the band? That's my favorite.
Oh yeah, my favorite too. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about this. The Skeleton Tower guy.
I can't
That
remember
was
his
such
name.
a fun
There's
boss.
at least 2 or 3 names to remember there, and I don't have any of them.
So what? Somebody explain that character whose name we can't remember. I'll see if I can look it up, but I want to hear an explanation for those who might not be aware.
It was like a mariachi band that died, but then they lost some of the pieces of the skeleton. So then they just Frankensteined like one skeleton together that has one pair of legs, but then just has like 3 different torso skeletons coming out of it that all play different instruments. And then their whole shtick is he's building the skeleton army for Kalaka. And I think the whole thing is like Kalaka told him if he built the skeleton army that he'd give back the rest of the bones for the band members or something. Isn't there some sort of plot device like that, or am I imagining it?
Yeah, it was something like that.
They're missing their brother, who they had lost before they died, and Kalaka has promised to return him to them. And it's knowing what kind of guy Kalaka is, that's a promise he was probably never intending to keep. But they don't know that.
The Trio de la Muerte is what it looks like they're referred to as. And then of course we have Javier, Jaguar Javier. He's like you're almost like he's the bad guy that seems like he was once a good guy, you know. And I think he even says like I was once like you, and he doesn't want to fight Juan. He wants to, postpone the battle. He keeps saying, go home, go back to where you came from. Don't get involved. And then I'm willing to bet somebody's got something to say about Flameface, because Flameface was hilarious.
I always like how he's throwing back shots and there was nothing in it.
Yeah. I always like how when he would toss the shot back, you would see the flame grow, because it's like, supposedly he's tossing back tequila, so it's making the flames go. And he's he's got the 2 6-shooters, and he just, there's like one part of the game where he won't stop shooting at the ceiling. And he says like, yeah, LOL, really big. Like,
I love the part where I think it was him where he says like troll.
Yes.
Well, and I love the running
him,
gag that he always gets, he does the shot and then he's shooting all the pistols in the air, and then he goes to shoot you and he's always run out of bullets when he goes to shoot you. And he does it like 3 or 4 times throughout the game. Like it's just a running gag.
Absolutely. And then there was Shtabai, who is the girlfriend of Carlos. Is that right?
It's ex-girlfriend.
Ex-girlfriend. And because I think one of the themes is that all of the people in Carlos's posse, they want something from him, and he's promised them something. And I think we see, most of those go unfulfilled. But in terms of bosses, not Carlos, not the final confrontations, which of those were the hardest or the most fun bosses?
I had a lot of trouble with the trio, but I also thought that one was the most fun, because there's just so many ways you can fight it. Like there's a lot of ways you can do that. You're not limited to one specific way how you have to hit them. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's because you attained more power-ups as you went, but I thought the bosses got easier as you went until the final boss, obviously. But I forget her name, but the scorned ex-girlfriend or whatever, she was almost more difficult, I thought, as the first boss. And then as it progresses, by the time you got to the Jaguar, I think I one-shotted him because it was, I don't know, it could have just been I was overpowered at that point, but it almost was like a descending order, kind of.
I thought that Jaguar Javier was kind of challenging when I got to him, because he keeps switching. You have to switch dimensions to keep up with him, and he keeps switching like when you don't really expect him to. So it's like you can be trying to hit him, and all of a sudden, nope, your hit's no good. So, and I think the final boss did that too, but this was first place I remember seeing it.
That's a really good part or point to transition to kind of, the meat of the game. Once we get in, we've started exploring the worlds. You go through stages. Every couple of stages, you get to a new town where you get to talk to people, engage in side quests. That's where you meet the combo chicken and you do the training. and all of that. But it's also where you get the abilities. And so like Agent Gold was saying, it's more than just the different punches, the special punches in different directions. There's two other pretty big mechanics that come into the game. One of them is your ability to swap on the fly between the two parallel worlds. And along with that, the presentation gets even cooler because every single music track in the game has a completely different, it's almost like the upside down in Stranger Things. It's like you've got the vibrant oranges and greens and reds of the land of the living, and then the land of the dead is all purples, but they never feel haunting. They always feel just, a little different, which I guess is kind of the whole point with Day of the Dead. That's kind of their whole theme. But so you get the ability to swap between dimensions, and it's just a button press, and that ends up opening up a lot of new options. You're going to want to go back and revisit a lot of the world. You're going to want to, there's even challenges where you have to swap different dimensions in the middle of a combo, punch, jump, dash, switch over, and then jump back up so that you can dodge, an obstacle that might exist in one world, but not in the other. But then there's one other ability that you get pretty late in the game that might be one of the funniest power-ups I think I've ever seen in a game. Every single thing about it. Who knows what I'm talking about?
The chicken.
That's absolutely right. So what you get the ability to turn into a dimension shifting chicken. It runs fast, it's small, and it's got a button that just makes you what's a chicken do? Caw? Or crow or whatever they do. If there's anybody here that had no idea that was coming, what was your experience like when you realized that you were going to turn into a chicken?
I thought that was going to be a long-term change, not one where you could switch back and forth. I thought you're going to have to stay a chicken, so I thought that would change the game completely.
They do make you stay that way, but not for very long.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, you get to go back and forth, but it definitely opens up. You can jump higher, you can squeeze through spaces. But, for all intents and purposes, it's probably easy to liken it to the ball that you turn into in Metroid as Samus, but you get this way later in the game.
I kept accidentally turning into the chicken.
I
would be in
Does you hate it when that happens?
I'd be in the middle of all sorts of stuff and just turn into the chicken and...
I would often mix up the dimension swap button with the chicken button, and it's like fall to my death because I've pressed the wrong one. Whichever one I happen to be going for.
So did anybody else get addicted to buying all the costumes just because you wanted to see what the chicken version was?
Oh,
wait,
I
what?
never
Every costume has a different chicken variant, and they're awesome.
Oh,
There's an egg
value.
with the feet coming out.
Oh,
Yeah, one of them's a
that may be a
soccer ball.
reference to the egg with the feet coming out. Maybe that's a reference to that old comic strip, the one by Jim Davis.
Well, the awesome thing about the egg with the chicken with the feet coming out is because that's the chicken for when you get the chicken suit. So you're Juan or Tostada running around dressed in a chicken suit, and when you change into the chicken, you turn into an egg.
I did not find out about any of this until after I had finished it. It started coming up in our conversations here, so this is like a complete surprise to me.
And a lot of that stuff is things that were added in the STCE, the Super Turbo Championship Edition. So a lot of the costumes and a lot of those funny post-game or late-game things, those were all added in later on. So as we get closer to the end of the game, anybody have any big side quests that stuck out to them? So you go into towns and you can either just plow right through and go find the next level, or you can talk to people in the town. I think it was Nate mentioning that, they're all pretty engaging conversations. They're usually heartfelt and funny. Does anybody remember a side quest or anything like that sticks out as funny or more interesting?
You can always talk about the world's greatest enchilada.
Let's hear it.
There's an old woman in a kitchen, and she needs ingredients for her wonderful enchilada recipe that she knows. And it's like 3 out of 4 ingredients you can find right away if you talk to everyone in town and you find the right people to talk to. And then there's just one left, and that does not come until quite a bit later on. So...
yeah, and I think that last one is like in the other dimension. You can only get it as the chicken. It's definitely one that requires most of your abilities.
It's a chili pepper that's so hot it can only exist in the land of the dead, right?
That makes perfect sense.
Of course. They need to get that one on Hot Ones. Let someone eat that one. So before we get to the end of the game, you know, once you've got the whole world open to you, you've got most of your abilities. I think the only last couple of abilities that you get right at the end are your ability to grab onto a wall and rocket yourself off of it. And that's the last, if I'm remembering correctly, that's the last ability you get. But any overall thoughts? You know, you get to this point where, like any good video game, it's pretty clear that, hey, you're about to go do this thing and it's going to be the end of the game. So finish up whatever you want to do. So I'm curious, maybe we just go around the panel. Once you had the whole game open to you, you know, did you go look for the health orbs and the stamina orbs, or did you go grind for money, or did you go complete side quests, or did you kind of just rocket your way through to the last temple of the game?
For my case, when I get to like kind of the ending area, there's a fast travel Olmec guy there, which those were really nice throughout the game, by the way, just to be able to move back and forth as you need to. But since I was doing my note-taking kind of approach, I was sort of backtracking a little bit here and there, going back and finding things as I found that I was able. So when I did get to where it was approaching the end game, it's like, let's finish first. And then because there's a fast travel right here, we can boot up the save file later and then go back and try to find everything else. So that's the approach I took.
So you wanted to see the end of the game, and then you went back and started exploring things.
Yeah, more or less, with some exploring mixed in along the way there. That's why it took me the extra couple of hours to get to the end in the first place.
Yeah, you're always going to have that natural exploration where you're at a fork in the road and you just go the other way. But then there's certainly new areas that open up as well. Did anybody here not play the Super Turbo Championship Edition? Did you play it on the Vita or the PS3 or anything like that? Or did everybody here play STCE on the Switch or another platform?
I played on the Vita, so I played the original version.
So there were two. So then everybody else here played through right before you get to the last temple, which is that one. So you do the Temple of War as I think the second or third temple. And then you kind of go through, what is it? Santa Lucida. I think it's like one of the last towns that you open up. And then from there, you make your way over to the final temple, the Great Temple, if I remember right. And in the STCE, they add an entire extra temple to the game. And it is maybe the biggest one in it. So, am I remembering this? You've got there's one temple at the beginning, the Temple of Rain, right? And then you do the tree, and then you do the Temple of War, and then you go towards the end. I think that's correct. But in Super Turbo Championship Edition, I need a sound effect right there every time someone says it. At that point, you go to Pico de Gallo.
Yeah, that's the place I got stuck in.
It comes full circle.
Yep.
Okay.
I couldn't figure out how to get to the Temple of War after that. I just finished the temple, got stuck in the temple, and that's where I am now.
Yeah, and I think that might be a side effect of that content being added later in the game. It wasn't a part of the original design. It actually changes the way you get the last couple of abilities in the game because they put them in the Pico Temple. I'll send you afterwards. I'll send you the guide that I used when I got there, because I had to use a guide absolutely when I got to the Pico area. I thought that was much more challenging. Any other thoughts about, like, hey, we're just about to go into the Grand Temple. I'm exploring, I'm upgrading, I'm collecting everything, trying to see all the sites. Anybody else have anything to add about that before we talk about the end?
Well, I got like right up to the end, and then I realized that I hadn't found the Pollo Bomb, because I'd been seeing the chicken egg, blocks throughout the game, and be like, oh, I want to see what's in behind those chicken egg blocks, and I didn't have the power yet. And so I was like, oh, geez, that's probably in El Fierno. So then I went back there and finished that. And then once you get the power to fly as the chicken, if you do enough of the challenges, spoiler alert, I'm sorry. If you didn't get that.
Hey, I already said it. You're good.
Then there's one area that like I knew when I was playing through the game, like you could just totally tell there was something hiding there, but you couldn't get to it without flying or without certain power ups. And then I finally got there, and it was the room where you just go in. And it's all the tiny little calakas and everything, and they're saying, "Are you?" And like I just about died.
Oh yes,
it just made me so happy.
That was hilarious.
Yeah, there's a couple of good rewards for going through El Infierno, which is basically just like a big gauntlet, and you get access to it not too far through the game, so you can actually do it way before you beat the game, and that gives the chicken the ability to fly, just like in every good Metroid game. At one point, you get the ability that basically breaks the game. It's like, here's your ability that'll let you do and see everything else because you're about to go to the end. And that's basically the Pollo Bomb and the ability to fly. Very cool stuff.
Did anyone else find the QR code place?
Yeah, and then you scan it, and it just says, "Congratulations, you found a QR code," or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Spanish too.
Wasn't it just like in a Word document too? It's like real basic.
The worst part was...
Yeah, it was so budget.
The worst part was I spent like half an hour trying to figure out how to scan the code because I couldn't find a way to scan it. And then it was just a little message. That's all it was.
What's funny is, think about 2013. That was probably like peak QR code phase where we thought that was going to be, it's certainly, I don't think QR codes got as big as anybody thought they would be. So if you think back to 2013, 2014, when the game released, it's like, oh yeah, everybody probably had a standalone QR code app on their phone at that time. So let's talk about the ending. I know Fantomic did not finish the game, so we're about to spoil it for you.
That's fine.
That was the other thing I couldn't finish because I'd already found a couple of mask pieces, so I knew you could finish the mask. So until I had found all of the mask pieces, I couldn't go to the end because I just get that completionist sort of thing where I know there's something if I get all the mask pieces. So yeah, I did, and I.
Mm-hmm. And so, throughout the game, there are, 6 mask pieces, and they're just like they're the hardest challenges of the game. And one of them is to actually beat the game on its own. So, and once you get all 6 of those, you unlock the good ending. But who wants to tell me, this is probably one of my only criticisms of the game. It's a lot of work to get the good ending. Most people will only ever see the bad ending. Anybody want to share what that bad ending is?
I don't think I've ever actually seen the bad ending because I think last time I got all the pieces too, just because that's how I played. That's just how I'm wired.
Such a pro gamer, he hasn't even seen what us peasants see.
I can't remember the first time I played it. I got the bad ending. So since I was replaying it, I made sure to get 100% this run. So I can't remember.
Oh, cool.
I'm assuming that you don't save El Presidente's daughter at that point.
Yeah, the standard or bad ending, you're able to defeat Calaca, but before the fight's over, he sacrifices El Presidente's daughter, and after you have defeated him, she is still sacrificed. And credits roll, and it's just life goes on without her.
Oh, now that you mention, I think I did get that ending the first time I played the game, but that was a while back, so I just had forgotten it. But yeah, I think I remember that now.
It is very forgettable.
And Yeah, very much.
I have found one of those masterpieces outside of the final boss, and knowing what I had to do to find that, I think the bar has been set very, very high to get that good ending.
Some of them aren't so hard. Some of them are just hidden, or like in areas that you need to use an ability to get to. Some of them are brutal.
I would love
top one.
I would love to find out. Yeah, that the treetop one that I got was the hardest one or something. Please.
To me personally, that was the hardest.
Good.
That you have to use everything, and you're switching back and forth, and it takes like such dexterity and everything. And then if you fall down, your life bar like you restart the whole thing. So you get a little bit of health each checkpoint. But I remember the fourth. I think there's 4 checkpoints in total. I got up and I was on maybe 2 more. Deaths I could take before I had to restart, and I was like, man, if I redo this, I don't know if I could do it.
I remember really struggling with the tree, like that one in the tree, the first time I played the game. But I think because Guacamelee 2 uses a lot more of the ridiculous sort of traversal mechanics, and since I had played that like 6 months earlier, I think my reflexes were primed.
I just remember
I was thinking the same thing. That area where you had the tree in Guacamelee 2 might actually be one of the most satisfying things I've ever accomplished in a game. And I think I did it on stream. Like the only time I streamed, I played in 2018, I did Extra Life, and I played probably 90% of Guacamelee 2 all the way through on that stream in one sitting. So you can actually watch me lose my mind, because I started after I'd been already going for like 14 hours. I started at like 2 in the morning. I'm like, I'll just start this game, see if it's good. But those crazy mechanics get, there's some awesome epic challenges towards the end of Guacamelee 2. So I agree there. But my chief complaint there is that it's too hard to get the good ending. And if you've played Guacamelee 2 at all, it assumes you got the good ending. So at least everybody will get to see it. I mean, like, I don't really need to spoiler. It's the very beginning of the game, but you end up with El Presidente's daughter. So that's how the new one, or that's how the sequel starts. Any other thoughts on the completion criteria, seeing the ending, anything like that?
I find it pretty funny that if you don't get the good ending, it makes the game look pretty cynical.
It's like you can tell they're kind of trying to push you to get that better ending, because you get the standard ending. There's obviously a better ending in there. And the fact that they give you one of the collectibles you need right after you defeat the final boss, that's another nudge that says, you could find the other 5 of these and something will happen here when you do that. But yeah, just the treetops one is the only one that I've found so far. And that is, I hope, the toughest platforming challenge in the game. And it is a very difficult platforming challenge. So it's just like they really set their bar high for getting that good ending.
Yeah, that one.
It probably is the hardest platforming challenge. I think it is.
There's a few platforming challenges in El Fierno that are rivaling it, but they're more dodge roll mechanic platforming challenges than the dimension shifting timing ones where you fall to your doom. And also they're shorter. So if you fail, you can just instantly start again, and you don't have these long.
It's not a massive endurance
you don't have
test.
these long things you have to try to get through.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. There's one of them that's definitely the one that'll make me cry, where it's like, use your abilities to get to the end, and the criteria for a gold medal is just to finish.
The most brutal one is there's one where you have to get a super high combo meter, and they won't let you dodge. So you have to do it without dodging, and it just about broke me.
Those combat ones I was able to get through eventually, just by trial and error and figuring out what the enemies are doing and kind of planning my general flow and figuring good enough is good enough. And then it's fine if I get hit after that. But yeah, there's some crazy stuff
with spikes. There's another one with spikes where you're constantly flipping back and forth between dimensions, and then there will be walls that you'll have to almost pass through and then hit the switch. So it's like real technical on when you have to hit it. And then you have to cling to that wall, jump back, and then do the same thing. So it's like real repetitive, but it's almost like a gymnastics thing where if you screw up once, you're restarting the whole segment. So
I think I accidentally found that place, but if I remember correctly, I gave up on it.
It's like the meme where the baby walks around the corner and then turns around and walks away like, oh, no.
A lot of those rooms in there, though, once you figure out that a lot of the rooms have a gimmick, right? So either a movement gimmick or like the combo one that I just was beating my head against. I realized that I needed to buy one of the costumes, and then it was not so bad because I was just too powerful and I couldn't build up the combo meter because I was defeating the enemies too fast. And so then there's a costume that actually makes your punches weaker. So then you can get more hits in your combos, and then it was not so bad.
That is definitely going to be worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, especially when you're going through and cleaning up the rest of the game. You absolutely want to play around with the different costumes because they all, like Nate said, they all have that point. There's a reason for all of them, and some of them are really, really fun. Especially there's a couple that the only negative effect is that you are a little bit weaker to incoming damage, like your defense drops a little bit. But by the time you've beaten the game, that's not going to be as big of a challenge to you if you've already beaten it. You know, you'll probably be have enough dexterity to hang in there. So, good. Well, any other thoughts on the end of the game, the ending of the game?
I liked the ending. I liked the artwork and stuff it gives you and the good ending. I don't know. It wasn't like the best ending I've ever seen, but I appreciated the artwork and just love seeing all like the little happy ending sort of illustrations they did. I thought they were kind of fun and got to see, the different characters that I'd gotten really fond of throughout the game sort of done up in cool little posters, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, those are neat at the end.
Yeah, I thought the cutscenes were real clean. Just since they're doing that like paper cutout look, like her hair, how they have the negative space, how it's all solid black, but there's still flow and like lines to it, if that makes sense. And then there's like the flowers in it and everything. It was so subtle, but like real clean at the same time. I just thought it was like anytime someone's able to do that, where it's not just these graphics blowing you away, but just the subtlety of it makes it beautiful.
Sometimes you look at that stuff and you wonder how they got such clean lines. It's like, when do you ever see lines that are that bold and sharp and clean in a video game? Like, they really did nail that somehow.
It takes restraint, too, where you have to, make sure that it's all structured where everything looks stylistically the same, but it's still simple. So it's like almost the complexity and the simplicity where they have to keep thinking of new ways to do the designs, but they're all basic, geometric shapes in a way. And I could appreciate stuff like that versus, something that's like almost like a photorealistic thing in a way.
Absolutely. I don't think anybody in this group or anybody else in the Backlog Club that played it would say that they went back and saw this game and thought of it as outdated graphically. It has a proper visual art style that really almost gives it some timelessness.
Yeah, it's very recognizable.
Yeah, I think it's the same way like how
Absolutely.
SNES holds up better than like PlayStation or 64. Like anytime you're doing like a cell shaded look, it's always like Wind Waker. That game's going to look good forever almost just because of the style that it's done it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So as we wrap things up, I want to go around the room, the virtual room, as it were, and I want to ask, give the game a rating out of 10. I don't really care if you use decimals or whatever. I want to hear your walk away. How do you score this game? And then I also want to hear, do you see yourself playing another Drinkbox game? And if so, which? Do you think you're going to try Severed, which is a first-person dungeon crawler of sorts with heavy touchscreen mechanics, which, by the way, the Switch is the only place that it plays as good as it did on the Vita, so I do recommend it. Or do you think you're going to try Guacamelee 2 when you're in the mood? Or are you going to hold off for the upcoming roguelike Nobody Saves the World? So the score And then what's next on your plate if you're going to follow Drinkbox into another gaming adventure? Agent Gold?
I think I'm going to give the game 8 out of 10. The places that I see it falling short is there are just a couple of moments where I don't think they separate the difficulty outright. Like things that are mandatory are very difficult. They set the bar so high on the ending like that. Everything else, though, is pretty fantastic. I love the presentation, the visuals, the music. Most of the challenges that are not overly difficult, those are all great. As far as Drinkbox, this was my first real exposure to them. I didn't even really see much footage of this game before playing it. So I've got some research to do. I see that it's a competent developer. So I want to look into what else they've made and see what's going to be on my radar going forward.
Good. Glad to hear it. What about you, Nugget?
Sorry. I would give it an 8-7. Just because I finished it. I honestly don't finish a lot of games because I get distracted by newer and shinier things. So it was hard sometimes, very relentlessly hard. I think there was some, a little bit of difficulty challenges that ramped up, a little unevenly, but overall, I just love the aesthetic of the game. I love the luchador aspect of it, and I love the fact that I actually started a game and finished it all in 1 month without getting distracted and having to come back to it. And
yeah, it's nice having a group of people playing it alongside, isn't
absolutely. It? And it's my first Drinkbox game. I would definitely try Guacamelee 2 sometime in the future. I mean, I have a huge backlog that still needs to be tended to, but I definitely would come back for more. I definitely would try their roguelike that's coming out, assuming it comes to the Switch, because that's my primary console. But yeah, I'm impressed. I will stand by Drinkbox as a reputable publisher.
Good. Glad to hear it. What about you, Fantomic?
Well, here's the thing. So I would say as a whole, this game was definitely something I would say is quality. The thing is, though, I don't think it's quite my kind of game. For personal enjoyment, I would say it's probably only a 6 out of 10 for me, which I would still say I enjoyed it. I definitely thought it was a fun time. But I don't think it's a game I'm going to be replaying ever, because I'm not a big fan of Metroidvanias in general. So
then you look at this and you think this probably isn't a Metroidvania that can win over those who aren't fans of the genre, because that's kind of stuff that we look for at Nindie Nation a lot, is what are those quintessential cornerstones of a genre that can convince you to like them even if you don't like it. And so that's good to hear that you didn't really feel like Guacamelee was one that could win over even people who don't like those style of games.
Yeah, I did enjoy it though. It was fun. But I'm not going to be going for collectibles and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if I'm going to play any of the other games. Probably not going to play Guacamelee 2. But apparently it seems like their other games aren't all Metroidvanias. So since that's the case,
no, they are not.
Yeah, I might actually give.
No, they are all very different.
Might give 1 or 2 of them a shot. I'll have to do some more research first, though.
Yeah, they're all fantastic. Severed is a top tier game in its genre, so there's a lot of good stuff out there. Random, we'll go to you next. Overall score and takeaway of kind of where you might go next with Drinkbox if you play something else from them.
I'll give it an 8.5 overall. I've played their whole library up until this point, so I'm excited for their next one. I might go back to Guacamelee. I mean, right now I kind of want to check out the Super Championship Edition. I don't know if I'll do it right away, but I definitely want to check out the new temples and everything like that. But Severed was my most recent one up until, replaying Guacamelee. Like I said, I played that last March, like whenever the world shut down. I was like, well, let me get into some of the games I've been meaning to play. And I was surprised at how much I loved that game. Like the story was really, I don't know, it stuck with me. I didn't think, like sometimes stories like the last thing I'm looking for. It's more like gameplay and like style and everything. And then the story's good, then it's just kind of, an extra. So yeah, I'm excited because their next game looks totally different as far as like graphical style. So yeah, just excited for that one.
It does. I think you can pick out, if we were to show you what Tales from Space looks like, I think you could still connect the dots that it's Drinkbox, or at least not far off.
Yeah.
But then obviously Guacamelee 1, 2, and Severed are all identical. I mean, I think you could see the art style in Severed and say, yeah, this has to be the same team. In that way, I kind of think of Drinkbox similarly to Supergiant. Just like they have Bastion and Transistor and Hades, and they're doing different things, but they have their own anchors for how they approach video games. I think Drinkbox might not be quite the same echelon as Supergiant. They might be, but very similar approach there. What about you, Nate? Why don't you bring us home?
I would give this game a 5 taco combo from the best taco stand in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is Victor's Tires and Tacos. This game is like comfort food to me. I love Metroidvania style games. I love games that sort of hit that like 10 to 15 hour length. They're like perfect for me for attention span most of the time. And it was the second time I played it, and I was worried if some of the charm would have rubbed off having it be a second playthrough. And I think I liked it as much or more the second playthrough, maybe more because I remember getting frustrated a little bit more the first playthrough. And the second playthrough, I sort of knew what I was up to a little bit better. So some of those moments that I got really frustrated with weren't as bad. Next up, I love Drinkbox. I love Drinkbox games. Severed is already in my backlog. And so at some point in time, that will come up and I'll play that one for sure. I'm also really excited. I didn't realize there was shared kinship with Bleed and Bleed 2. And those are two games that I've wanted to pick up a ton of times. I've been so tempted to pull the trigger when they're on sale because they go on awesome sales frequently. And I've heard they're amazing, although not super long.
They're on sale right now.
Yeah.
There you go. Go get it right now. Now, honestly, Bleed and Bleed 2 are like 45-minute long games, but that's not the point. You kind of got to get into it and see it. But I mean, if you want to sit down and roll credits, they're usually on sale for like $2 and you can roll credits in about 45 minutes. But you'll see that there's a larger structure to the game that will get a few hours out of it.
I think I would probably enjoy it. And a lot of what I enjoyed about Guacamelee is just like I don't know, I love the combat and I love the movement in it. So I liked just exploring and running around and just doing stuff in the game. It just feels so nice to me.
Good. Yeah, and I guess for myself, I think I'll probably put Guacamelee as like a 9 out of 10, and I think of it as this is a shining example of what a genre has to offer, and a game that is probably worth playing for just about anyone. I think that it's an easy recommendation to give to anybody that wants to play a video game. And I was also very impressed with how much I enjoyed it going back to it. I wonder if those of you who either didn't finish it or played it for the first time now, kind of like Nate said, like when I went into the combo chicken rooms and I remember, oh, you know what? I did this before. And just knowing that I had eventually gotten it, I feel like it was a lot easier now, 7 years later or whenever. So all around great, and I'm going to be there on day one for Nobody Saves the World. I can't wait to check that out. Otherwise, thank you all for hanging out, for being a part of the Nindie Backlog Club for the first time. We're trying this out, so anybody that's listening, give us your feedback on the structure, the way we included all of you. I know it was kind of scatterbrained a couple of times, but the goal here is to find some games that, Nindie Nation focuses on new games and then, of course, games that go on sale. So not often do we go back and look at some of the greatest games in the indie space. And so the point here is to find those games that, if you're a big fan of indie games, these are some of the titles that you should probably have under your belt. For all other things indie game related, please come check out Nindie Nation, weekly YouTube show and podcast available anywhere you can type in Nindie Nation. You'll probably find us. We're on Twitter, we're on Discord, we're also on Twitch every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern to check out a couple of the week's newest games. And I want to take a minute to thank all of you that joined today: Agent Gold, Nugget, Random, Nate, and of course Fantomic. All of you, thank you for hanging out. And everybody else, thanks for listening. We look forward to having your feedback and seeing you next week on the next episode of Nindie Nation. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.